She covered the bill without thinking twice. The old woman thanked her and walked away. That was supposed to be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 years later, Zara stood in a room full of people who wanted her gone. The only one who didn't, the only one standing between her and ruin, was the grandson of the woman whose groceries she had paid for at a register in Osaka on a Tuesday afternoon she barely remembered. Some debts don't announce themselves. They wait. Think about the last time you did something kind without expecting anything back. This story is about what happens after those moments, what they set in motion that you'll never see coming. Hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments before we go further. We read every one. Now let's go back to that grocery store. Zara Osei had been a nurse for 7 years. Not the kind who watched the clock. The kind who memorized which patients needed their medication 20 minutes early because the pain would spike before the posted time. Nobody else was keeping track. She did. She worked the evening shift at a private clinic in Namba, the kind of place that served international patients and executives and anyone who could afford discretion alongside their treatment. The hallways were so clean that shoes on the floor could wake a sleeping patient 3 rooms away. Zara had learned in her first month to walk differently, quieter at the heel. She had also learned to keep her opinions to herself, which was harder. She was good at the work, exceptional. And when I say exceptional, I mean the kind of good that you only get from 7 years of showing up every day and caring about the result. Her error rate over 7 years was functionally 0. Her patient satisfaction scores were the highest on the floor. She spoke English, French, and enough Japanese to do her job without confusion. She had 3 commendations in her file and 1 formal complaint. A surgeon had nearly given the wrong dosage. She caught it before he could. He filed the complaint the next morning. It was dismissed inside a week. He still didn't look at her in the hallway. That was what it was. She had learned that too. And if you have ever worked somewhere that treated your excellence as a problem, you already understand exactly what that feels like. The grocery store was not part of any plan. It was a Saturday in November. She was off shift. She had a list and a tote bag, and she was tired. The specific tiredness of someone who has been managing other people's emergencies long enough that the quiet days feel slightly unreal, like a body between heartbeats. She moved through the aisles of the Izumiya near her apartment. Rice, fish, the green tea that helped her sleep. She was not paying attention to much of anything when she noticed the woman ahead of her at the register. Old, very old. The kind of age that arrives in the back and the hands before the face. She wore a dark coat. Neat, pressed. She carried a single cloth bag, held in both hands. The cashier read out the total. The woman went still. She opened a small purse, counted the coins inside, came up short, counted again, said something quietly to the cashier. The cashier, maybe 19, shrugged in the direction of the items on the belt. The line behind the woman was short. 2 people. Then Zara. Nobody moved. The woman counted the coins a 3rd time. You know that moment when you can see someone doing the math, and the math is not going to work. She was not embarrassed in the usual visible way. Not flushing. Not looking at the floor. And if you have ever been on the wrong side of that calculation, too much month left at the end of the money, you know how she was carrying herself right now. She was doing arithmetic, and the arithmetic was not working, and she was going to handle it the same way she appeared to handle everything, methodically and without complaint. She began to remove items from the bag. A small packet of tofu, a bundle of green onions, setting them on the counter's edge, one at a time, with both hands. Zara stepped forward. She didn't deliberate. She put her card on the counter and told the cashier to run the whole thing. The cashier looked at her. The woman in the dark coat looked at her. Zara looked at the register. 4,300 yen. Less than $30. Nothing. The woman did not rush to thank her. She did not perform gratitude. She put the items back in her bag. One by one. Slowly. Then she turned to face Zara and she bowed. Not quickly. Not shallowly. A real bow. Held. The kind that means something more than manners. When she straightened, her eyes were clear and direct. "You are kind," she said, in careful English. She looked at Zara the way very old people sometimes look at very young ones, like they are reading something not yet written. "I hope the world is kind to you in return." Zara smiled and said it was nothing. She paid for her own groceries and walked home. She thought about the woman for maybe an hour. Then she thought about other things. Then she forgot. The way you forget small good moments, because there is always something else pressing in behind them. What she did not know was that the woman had watched her go, had stood at the exit of the Izumiya and watched until Zara turned the corner. Then she took out a phone, old, thick, physical buttons, and called someone. One ring before it was answered. "I found her," the woman said. "Come, his name was Ryo Tanaka. He was 34 years old. He ran the Tanaka Gumi out of an office building in Shinsaibashi that officially housed an import consultancy. He had been running it since he was 27. When his father died of a stroke the doctors called natural causes. Ryo knew better. He dealt with it over the following 18 months in ways that never appeared in any newspaper. He was not large, not loud. He wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent and wore them like work clothes. Practical, nothing more. His face read calm in every situation. He had decided, sometime in his adolescence, that the alternative was unacceptable. You would not have guessed, looking at him, what he was. That was the point. He was also the person his grandmother called first when she needed anything. Always, think about what it means to be that person for someone. Not the one they call when it's convenient. The one they call first, when it matters. When the arithmetic is not working. Not the one they call when it is convenient. The one they call first. Not for lack of other options. And if you have ever had someone in your life like this, someone who decided they trusted you and did not waver, you know what that is worth. Because Michiko Tanaka made her determinations once and did not revisit them. She had determined that Ryo was the one she trusted above the rest. Michiko had raised Ryo from the time he was 9. His mother had died young. His father had been present in the technical sense. Michiko had been present in the actual sense. She walked him to school, fed him, listened to him, corrected him when he needed correcting, which was often because a willful and intelligent child requires a great deal of correction. She understood quietly what he was becoming. She hadn't tried to stop it. She tried to shape it, the way you do with something that has direction and force and will go somewhere with or without your guidance. He had become, by most measures, feared, not by Michiko. She still sent him grocery lists, expected him to call on Sundays, corrected his posture when he slouched. He let her. There was exactly one person in Osaka from whom Ryo Tanaka accepted correction without comment. The small old woman in the dark coat who had handed him his school lunches for a decade. Michiko did not explain things directly. She never had. She waited 2 weeks after the grocery store before she said anything, and what she said was not an explanation, it was a direction. The clinic in Namba. The evening shift. There is a nurse there. The expression she reserved for things she considered obvious. You should go. I'm not sick, Rio said. That is not what I mean, Michiko said. He went. Not immediately. 3 weeks later, one of his men was brought to the clinic with cracked ribs and a gash along his forearm. The associate who drove him came back with a report. The evening shift nurse was a black woman, early 30s. Efficient. No drama. She had handled the man's pain anxiety without condescension. The associate noted this because he had seen it done poorly, and the difference was noticeable. Rio filed it away. The opportunity came 4 months after the grocery store. A man in his distribution chain had a wife admitted to the clinic. Complications from a high-risk pregnancy. The man called Rio at 11 at night. Not to ask for anything specific. Just to hear someone say it would be fine. Rio drove to the clinic and sat in the waiting area. He was not there officially. He was there the way he always moved, present before anyone knew he was necessary. You would not have guessed, watching him, that he was anything other than a man waiting for news. The nurse who came out to update the husband was Zara. Rio watched her deliver the news. Steady, here is something you notice. If you watch someone who is genuinely good at their work, they treat the person in front of them like a full adult capable of handling real information. She was specific. She answered his questions without impatience. When the man started to cry, she didn't give him distance. She stayed in the same space. Let him be what he was. Then she told him what would happen next, and she meant it. When she left, she moved like someone with somewhere to be. Rio stayed until the baby arrived at 3 in the morning, healthy, both mother and child fine. He drove home in the dark. Here is something you need to understand about the world Rio occupied, and pay attention to this part, because it matters. It was a world built on performance, on reading the shoes, the cut of the jacket, the hour you arrived. Everybody calculated. Everybody performed. Everybody was afraid. That was what the world rewarded. He had known since his mid-20s that most of what was offered to him came through the lens of what he controlled. You develop, over time, an instinct for what is not being performed. Zara had told a dangerous man, with no apparent awareness of how dangerous he was, that he should take better care of himself, and then walked away to something more urgent. That was either ignorance or honesty. He had seen enough of the first to recognize the second. He went back to the clinic the following week, a shoulder he had been managing for years. The nurse on duty was not Zara. He saw her in the hallway on his way out. She was not looking at him. He left. He came back. The 4th visit was genuine, a man who had taken damage in a situation that couldn't be explained to a regular emergency department. He came at 10 in the evening, sat in the waiting area. Zara was on duty. She passed him twice without recognition. On the 3rd pass, she stopped. "You've been here before," she said, not a question. "Yes," Rio said. She looked at him. Assessing, he was accustomed to that look, finding something that made people take a step back. She did not step back. "Is your shoulder better?" she said. He had not expected that. He said it was about the same. She nodded once. "It won't improve on its own," she said, and went back to work. If you are wondering what he thought at that moment, so was he. Rio sat in the waiting area for another hour. He thought about Michiko at the exit of the Izumiya. The cloth bag. The bow that lasted too long. The words "I found her," and what they meant. What he was only beginning to understand. He found reasons to return. 3 more visits over the following 2 months. And here is what you need to understand. In the world Rio occupied, going back to a place was a decision. Everything was a decision. He learned her name from the board near the nursing station. Zara Osei. He learned she had come from London 4 years ago, She lived near the river, no family in Japan. Well regarded at the clinic by everyone except the surgeon, whose regard was not worth having. He did not tell Michiko what he was doing. Michiko had her own patience. She waited for him to catch up. The moment things shifted was not dramatic. It almost never is. Zara was working late. She was charting at the station near the end of the wing when Rio appeared at the far end of the corridor with one of his men. The man was not walking right, managing something he had decided not to acknowledge. She saw this from 30 feet away. She came toward them. "What happened?" she said. Not to Rio, to the man. The man looked at Rio. Rio looked at Zara. He said it was not serious. "I'll be the one who decides that," she said. She took the man into an examination room before anyone could agree or disagree. Rio stood in the corridor. The man came out 40 minutes later with his ribs wrapped and a prescription in his hand, and a look specific to people who had expected one kind of interaction and received another entirely. He looked at Rio and said, quietly, "She made me lie down." "I know," Rio said. He had heard, through the door, that voice. Steady, unhurried, allowing no room for deflection. The voice of someone who had already decided the outcome before you finished objecting. When Zara returned to the corridor, she said, "2 ribs. He needs rest." "I know you're going to tell me he won't." "He won't," Rio said. "Make sure he avoids anything requiring deep breathing in the next 72 hours. She looked at him, the reading expression, moving past what he was presenting to what was underneath. "And you? Your shoulder is still wrong." "It's an old thing," he said. "Old things don't stop hurting because they're old," she said. "They stop hurting because someone addresses them." She said goodnight and went back to her charting. What she did not know was that Rio stood in that corridor longer than he needed to, that in the car on the way back, neither he nor his man spoke a word, that by the time they arrived, Rio had made a decision he did not yet have words for, but that was already settled. What he did not know was that Zara had gone home and spent 15 minutes at her kitchen table, thinking about a man with a calm face and expensive suits, who kept appearing with reasons she suspected were slightly manufactured. That she had made tea, gone to bed, and told herself it was not her business. It wasn't, yet 3 weeks later, Zara was suspended. The complaint was filed by Dr. Hayashi, senior surgical consultant. 22 years at the clinic, which he treated as something closer to ownership than employment. The allegation was insubordination, that she had countermanded his post-operative instructions without authorization. What had actually happened was this. A patient on the 4th floor showed early signs of infection. Zara flagged it to Dr. Hayashi. No response. She flagged it again. He told her to continue the existing protocol. She watched the patient's temperature rise through the evening. At 2 a.m, she contacted the on-call physician directly. The patient recovered. Dr. Hayashi filed the complaint the next morning. The clinical director called her in on a Thursday. He said the words "pending review." He looked at his desk while he said them. He was not the loud kind of coward. He was the other kind. Tidy office, mild voice. Did whatever the most powerful person in the room appeared to want. Zara went home. She did not fall apart. 7 years had taught her one thing above everything else. When someone tries to take the work away, you do not collapse. You gather evidence. She made a list. She pulled her documentation. She emailed 2 colleagues who had been on shift that night and asked plainly if they would speak to what they had observed. One said yes. One did not reply. She did not call Rio. She had her own problem and intended to solve it. He found out anyway. His men used the clinic often enough that word traveled. His assistant mentioned it as one item among several. The nurse on the evening shift was suspended, pending a complaint from the senior consultant. Rio asked 2 questions. 2. That is all you need when you already know how to find the answers. What was the complaint? Who was the clinical director? He spent several hours mapping the geometry. Who had invested with whom? What the board looked like, which members had business that touched interests he understood. This was ordinary work for him, the same way other men checked the weather. He called Michiko. "The nurse," he said. "I know," Michiko said. "Did you know before or after?" A pause. "I know what I know," she said. "What are you going to do?" He made calls. Not to the clinic. To 3 people whose investments touched the board. He then had dinner with a board member who sat on 2 other boards near Rio's interests. They did not discuss the clinic. They did not discuss Zara. But the board member left the restaurant with a clear sense of where Rio's personal interest lay. That was sufficient. 12 days after her suspension, Zara received a call. The review had concluded. The complaint was not substantiated. She was expected back on Monday. The clinical director used his mild voice. He did not apologize. He did not explain the unusual speed. He wished her well. She went back to work. The speed was not right. The reversal was too clean. In the days that followed, she noticed small things, a comment from a colleague, the quality of Dr. Hayashi's silence, which had changed from hostile to resigned, the silence of someone who has been told, without words, that the ground has shifted. She put the pieces side by side, could not yet connect them. She went back to her shift. That Friday, Rio came. Not for anyone who was hurt. He came at 8 in the evening and sat in the waiting area, and when Zara came out between patients, she found him there and stopped. "Are you hurt?" she said. "No," he said. "Then why are you here?" He said, "I wanted to know if you were all right." The corridor was lit in clinical white, nowhere to hide. She looked at him with the reading expression, past what someone presented to what was underneath. "How do you know what happened?" she said. "I know many things," Rio said. "That's not an answer." "No," he said, "it isn't." She sat down, 1 chair over, looked at the floor for a moment, then at him. "Did you do something?" "I had a conversation," he said, "with someone who has relevant influence." "Why?" "What happened to you was wrong," he said. "I was in a position to affect whether it continued to be wrong." She studied him. He let her. In his world, people looked at him and then looked away. She looked and waited. She was not going to stop until she found what she was looking for. "Who are you?" she said. He told her his name. He told her what he did. Not all of it, but accurately and without deflection. She did not move away. "Your grandmother," she said. He went still. "Old woman. Dark coat. Grocery store near the river. Something not quite a smile. I paid for her groceries about 8 months ago. 4,300 yen. "Yes," Rio said. "She's the reason you kept coming here." "She pointed me in the direction," he said carefully. "And you came." "I came," he said. The corridor was quiet. A monitor beeped once and stopped. Neither of them spoke, the specific silence of people deciding whether to step toward something or away from it. Zara said, "I'd like to meet her." Rio said, "She'd like that." Michiko served tea on a Sunday morning in her apartment in Tennoji. And if you have ever been in the presence of someone who genuinely listens, not waiting to speak, actually listening, you know what Zara walked into. Small, exactly ordered. A single orchid in a plain white pot on the low table. She poured Zara's cup first. She asked about the work. She listened to the answers with her whole attention. You have to understand what it means to be listened to that way. Zara had spent 7 years in rooms where people half heard her, patients who were frightened, colleagues managing their own problems, supervisors who began composing a response before she finished speaking. Michiko received what Zara said completely and without hurry. What she said in return always addressed the exact thing that had been said, not something adjacent to it. Rio sat slightly back, drank his tea, watched them. He had the look of a person who has arrived somewhere he didn't expect and found it is exactly where he needed to be. Michiko asked Zara what she had wanted to be when she was young. Zara said a doctor. Then, after a pause, she said what she had actually become. She had started nursing school thinking it was a step toward something else. Found, in the first year, that it was the actual thing, not diagnosing, not deciding, the sustained presence. Being the person who stayed. She liked that the patient's first face in the morning could be hers. She liked knowing which one needed the window open and which needed it closed. She liked being the person who remembered. Michiko looked at Rio. He pretended not to notice. She refilled everyone's tea. What happened over the following months was the slow kind of thing. The kind that builds the way rivers build, daily contact that seems minor and accumulates into something structural. Rio was not easy in the ways that might have made it simple. Private, carried things he did not name, kept his world at a careful distance from hers. Partly practical, partly habit, old architecture that had served him a long time. She was patient the way you are when you are genuinely interested and not performing interest. She asked questions, waited for the answers, did not ask the ones she suspected he was not ready for yet. He noticed things about her she hadn't expected to be noticed. The way she turned her cup before she drank, the quietness she went into when processing something difficult, not withdrawal but attention turned inward. A different quality than her usual stillness. The way she talked about patients without names, always, even in general conversation, as if the habit of discretion went all the way down. She noticed things about him. The specific way he held his phone when a difficult call came in, face down first, a breath, then pick up. The fact that he ate slowly and tasted his food, which was not what she expected from a man whose life ran at the pace his did. The way he addressed Michiko, not carefully, not with deference, just directly, eye to eye, as an equal who happened to have been here longer. He told her, one evening in October, about his father. Not the stroke. The years before it. What his father had been, what Michiko had done, quietly, steadily, to be the counter to it. He told her plainly, as if recounting something that had happened to someone else. She heard the other version underneath. She told him about London, the year she nearly left nursing and did not. Her family, present, loving, entirely confused by her being in Japan. Her mother who video called on Sundays and asked about the food. Her father who asked about the weather because he didn't know what else to ask. She made Rio laugh. He had a laugh that arrived without announcement, sudden and genuine, as if it surprised him too. She found herself working for it. The effort was worth it. One night, after Fujimoto had been dealt with and the jollof rice was finished and the kitchen was warm and the river was dark outside the window, he told her about a man who had worked for his father. Someone who stayed when he didn't have to, when the situation gave anyone a reasonable excuse to leave. Rio had been 12. He remembered the man's face clearly. He had not said this to anyone before. She heard it the way she heard everything, completely, without rushing to fill the silence after. What happened to him? She asked. He retired, Rio said. He's in Kyoto now. I visit him twice a year. She looked at him. Does he know you visit because of that? Rio was quiet. No, he said. Maybe he should, she said. He didn't answer right away. Then, maybe, she took that as progress. The trouble came in November, almost a year after the grocery store. His name was Fujimoto. He ran a distribution operation adjacent to the Tanaka-gumi's territory. The treaty between them had held for 3 years on a simple calculation. Breaching it would cost more than honoring it. Then, Fujimoto brought in outside money. The math changed. Ryo had been watching the shift for 4 months. The decision came sooner than he planned. Fujimoto made a move on 2 businesses that moved capital through Ryo's structure. Financial, not violent, but financial in the way that announces intent. Ryo responded. What happened next resolved in a week. The treaty was renegotiated. The terms favored Ryo. Fujimoto withdrew. 2 of Ryo's men went to the clinic with injuries. Zara treated them. She knew what had happened in the approximate way she always knew. Enough shape, not all the detail. She did the work, sent them home. That night, when Ryo came to the clinic after closing, she was still at the station. She looked at him. "Are you all right?" she said. "Yes," he said. She kept looking. He was all right in the sense he always was, intact, uninjured, the surface maintained. But she had learned to read underneath the surface. Underneath it now was something that had been held tightly for a week and had not yet been put down. "Come here," she said. She put her hand on his right shoulder and pressed. He went still. 7 years?" she said. 7, he said. "What happened?" He told her something from his 20s. Mended wrong. Never attended to, because attending meant stopping long enough for someone to actually attend, and stopping was something he had not learned how to do. She worked on it for 20 minutes. No equipment. No ceremony. Her hands telling her what the joint needed with the efficiency of 7 years of practice. It was not romantic in any conventional sense. It was something more than that. Practical, unsentimental, completely present. The other kind of care. The kind that does not need an occasion. He drove home with his shoulder aching in the productive way. The way that means something is beginning to heal rather than only being managed. He called Michiko on Sunday and said simply, "You were right." "Of course," Michiko said. Tea? The trouble Fujimoto had created was not finished. He had withdrawn from Ryo's operations. He had not withdrawn from his interest in Ryo's personal life. Fujimoto was the kind of person who looked for leverage. He had been looking. He found Zara. Not through threat. Threats were loud, and loud was what Ryo looked for. He did something quieter. He had someone contact the clinic's medical licensing board with a series of complaints, procedural violations, documentation irregularities, sourced to what appeared to be internal records. Precisely fabricated. Plausible enough to require investigation. The kind of thing that, unaddressed, could follow a nurse across every hospital in the country. Zara received the letter on a Wednesday. She read it twice, sat very still for a long time. Then she called her colleague and asked if she could talk. She did not call Ryo. Conscious choice. She was not in the habit of calling people when she was in trouble and expecting them to fix it. She had handled her own problems since she was 22 and intended to go on doing that. Ryo found out anyway. The operational pattern behind the complaints was recognizable. One of his men had caught the edge of it while watching something else. The thread led to Fujimoto. He called Zara. He told her the complaints were fabricated. He told her who had made them. Plainly, a silence on her end, long enough that he knew she was placing what she understood about the situation she was actually in. "What does he want?" she said. "To use you," Ryo said. "To get to me. Can you make it stop?" "Yes," Ryo said. "Will it stay stopped?" "Yes," he said. "Not comfort. a statement of fact. She heard the difference. Then do it, she said. He did it. Not with violence. Financial pressure applied to the people around Fujimoto until the cost of pressing Ryo's life outweighed the benefit of stopping. A meeting. A room. 2 men across a table. 40 minutes. When it was over, the complaints were withdrawn, attributed to internal error with a formal apology from the source. The board closed its file. Zara received a second letter. Brief, conclusory, she read it at her kitchen table with her tea going cold beside her. She called Ryo. "Thank you," she said. "You should not have been put in that position," he said. "No," she said, "I shouldn't have." A beat. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Getting there," she said. "Come over. I made food." He came over. Jollof rice. The apartment smelled warm and alive. She served him a bowl larger than he would have taken for himself. He said it was the best thing he had eaten in 3 years. She told him not to say things he didn't mean. He said he always meant what he said. She believed him. Trustworthiness was part of his structure, not decorative. Load-bearing. Michiko came to the apartment the following Sunday. She had not been before. She arrived with a small package wrapped plainly. Inside was a piece of fabric. Old, indigo-dyed, very fine, a fragment of something larger. Zara looked at it and then at Michiko. "It belonged to my mother," Michiko said. "And her mother before. I have kept it for someone to give it to." She looked at Zara with the reading expression Ryo had clearly inherited. "I am giving it to you." Ryo in the kitchen doorway was very still. Zara held the fabric carefully. She thanked Michiko. Michiko asked about the tea. The morning continued. Both Zara and Ryo knew what the moment was. They did not name it. Things that are understood do not need to be named. The formal occasion came 4 months later. The Tanaka-gumi held a structured dinner twice a year, private, not theatrical. Every person of significance in Ryo's organization was present. What was visible in that room was understood by everyone in it. Ryo brought Zara. She wore something simple. She incorporated the fabric Michiko had given her into a sash at her waist. She sat beside Ryo at the head of the table. She was introduced. There were people in that room who had been watching her. The way outsiders get watched, with assessment held in suspension. Those people received an unambiguous signal. They did not misread it. She did not perform for the room. She was simply herself. Direct, attentive, unafraid of the silences that opened when someone tested her with a pointed question. One of the older men tried a comment about the clinic. She answered factually, without heat, and changed the subject with such natural ease that he was 3 sentences into the new topic before he understood the old one had been closed. Ryo watched this from the corner of his eye. He did not smile. But the quality of his stillness changed in the way she had learned to read. That same evening, a hospital board across town was concluding a review of Dr. Hayashi's conduct. It had been triggered by the documentation Zara had filed a year ago, combined with complaints several colleagues had been carrying without submitting. The board voted. Hayashi had understood, in the weeks prior, that something was coming. He had the specific quietness of someone who has calculated and found the numbers wrong. The verdict came while introductions were being made at the dinner. Zara was told the following morning. She sat with it at her kitchen table and felt something settle. If you have ever waited a very long time for something to be recognized, for your record to reflect what actually happened, not what someone needed it to say, for the record to reflect what actually happened, you know exactly what that settling feels like. Not triumph. Rightness. The sense of a ledger balanced. The specific person who had tried to end her work was facing real consequence, delivered through the proper process, by his peers on the record. Michiko turned 84 that December. Ryo organized a dinner at the restaurant in Ginza with the frameless art on the walls. He invited the people Michiko wanted there, which was a small number. Zara sat beside Michiko at one end of the table, Ryo at the other. Michiko ate well, spoke to everyone. At some point in the evening, she reached over and took Zara's hand and held it for a moment. "I told him it was you," Michiko said, in careful English, "when I saw you in the store." Zara said, "How did you know?" Michiko considered this. "You put the things back in my bag," she said, "after you paid. One by one." Carefully, she looked at Zara. "People who are kind in a hurry don't do that. You were kind and you were paying attention, both at the same time." She patted Zara's hand once. "That is rare." Zara was quiet for a moment. "Does he know you knew?" she said. "He knows I pointed," Michiko said. "He found everything else himself. That is how it should be." Across the table, Ryo appeared to be in conversation with one of his men. He was absolutely listening. Zara knew because she had learned to read the quality of his stillness when something mattered. His face was the same as always. Calm, nothing performed. But his posture had shifted, the slight change that meant he was holding something carefully. He looked over once. Their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. That was sufficient. The year turned. The clinic promoted Zara to senior nursing coordinator. Standards for the evening wing. Nobody filed a complaint about her again. The promotion came from a clinical director who had grown, over the year, better at looking people in the eye. Whether growth or consequence, she did not investigate. She learned to navigate his world in small ways, not to understand all of it. She was not naive about what she did and did not understand, but to know its shape, which questions were welcome and which to leave until he was ready. The difference between his unavailability from work and the kind that came from not knowing how to set the work down. One called for patience. The other called for the tone she used in clinic corridors. He was learning too. Learning that she was going to stay. Not because he owned her attention. Not because she lacked options. Because she had looked at the full picture and chose to be here. Which is different entirely from the conditional presences he had grown up around. She did not need what he had. She did not fear what he was. She stayed because she had found something real. And she was the kind of person who stayed for real things. Michiko knew this. She had known it in a grocery store. Before either of them knew anything. And if you have ever felt like someone in your life understood where you were headed before you did, that is the closest thing I can give you to what Michiko was. On a Tuesday in March, Zara was at the Izumiya near her apartment. List tote bag. She was not paying particular attention to anything when she noticed the woman ahead of her, young this time, a student. Standing at the register with the stillness of someone doing arithmetic that was not working, counting change, looking at the total. Zara stepped forward. She put her card on the counter. The student looked at her with the startled expression of someone receiving an unexpected kindness. She said thank you several times. She would pay it back, she said. How could she? Zara said it was nothing. She smiled at the girl. She paid for her own things and left. On the way home, she passed a garden near the river. Plum trees beginning to bloom. Weeks early this year. Branches edged in white against a gray sky. She stopped. The air was cold and very clear. Some things find you, she thought. You are minding your own business and carrying your groceries home, and something finds you. She walked on. Ryo was at her apartment when she arrived. He had a key. She had given it to him on a Wednesday in January, without much ceremony, the way she did most things. He was at the kitchen table, jacket off, phone face down, 2 mugs of tea, hers still warm. She put down the groceries, sat across from him. "Good shift?" he said. "Day off," she said. "I was at the store." "How was the store?" "Same as usual," she said. Then, after a moment, "I paid for a student's groceries." Rio looked at her. She looked back at him. He picked up his tea. "Your grandmother," he said, "would say it runs in the family." "She would," Zara said. "And she'd be right." She wrapped her hands around her mug. The kitchen was warm. Through the window the river moved, slow and dark and patient, the way it always moved, regardless of everything else. The world had been unkind to her. Often, in the specific way it is unkind to women who are excellent and invisible at the same time, holding everything together while being called the wrong name by people who cannot find a vein with a map. She had not been grateful for that. She would not tell you that suffering builds character, because she had seen too many people built by suffering who were only harder for it, not better. But she believed in paying attention. She believed in the 4,300 yen and the cloth bag and the careful way you put things back one at a time. She believed in the shoulder that needed someone to address it. She believed in Michiko, who had looked at a stranger in a grocery store and said simply, "I found her." Come, you cannot plan for the good things. You can only be present for them, awake, paying attention, unafraid to step forward when the arithmetic is not working and you have the means to change it. The kindness costs you almost nothing. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it finds you again years later, when you are not expecting it, returned in ways you could not have planned and would not have thought to ask for. That is enough. That is more than enough. And if this story has given you even a fraction of that, the reminder that your small acts of care matter, that you do not know what you are setting in motion, then it has done what it came here to do. Rio put down his tea. He reached across the table and took her hand. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. That was sufficient. Some debts don't announce themselves. They wait until you've forgotten all about them. And then they find you, and everything that follows is the interest. The months that followed Michiko's gift were ordinary in the way that the best stretches of a life are ordinary. Not eventful, not defined by crisis or turning point, but full. Zara started keeping a few things at his apartment. A spare set of scrubs, the specific brand of tea she needed in the morning, a book she was in the middle of. He noticed these arrivals without comment. He made space for them. She noticed what he had, by way of living. The apartment in Shinsaibashi was large and exactly appointed and almost without personal objects. One photograph of Michiko, from years ago, in a frame on a shelf. A single shelf of books in Japanese that she couldn't read. A kitchen equipped well enough that someone clearly cooked in it, though she had not seen him cook. She asked him about the kitchen. He said Michiko had taught him. He paused. Then he said that Michiko had taught him a lot of things under the cover of cooking, and that he had understood, in retrospect, that the cooking was never really the point. Zara said, "What was the point?" "Attention," Rio said. "To pay attention to what you are doing while you are doing it, not to be somewhere else." She looked at him for a moment. "She's a remarkable woman." "Yes," he said. No qualification, no elaboration. Just, yes. They cooked together sometimes, on evenings when neither of them had somewhere to be. It turned out she could cook and he could cook, and that they had entirely different approaches. She moved quickly, adjusted by taste, assembled without measuring. He moved slowly, precisely, with the consideration he brought to most things. They had one argument about stock. It was brief and specific and genuinely about stock, and Zara won it, and Rio acknowledged this without resentment, which she noted as significant. She went home to London for 10 days in February. First time in 14 months. Her mother held her for a long time at the airport, and then started asking questions about Japan, and whether she was eating, and what the apartment looked like, and had she made any friends. Zara said yes to most of these. When her mother asked about Rio, she had heard his name once on a phone call and filed it away the way mothers file things. Zara said there was someone. Her mother asked what he did. Zara said he was in business. Her mother, who had raised a woman who handled emergencies for a living and who understood that some questions answered themselves later, said, "As long as he is kind to you." "He is," Zara said. Her father asked about the weather in Osaka. She came back in the second week of February with a coat her mother had made her take, heavier than she needed, and a package of biscuits her aunt had sent, and something unclenched in her chest as the train pulled into Namba Station and the city arranged itself around her in the familiar way. She noticed this. The way a place becomes yours without you deciding it will. Rio met her at the station. She had not asked him to. He was simply there, in a coat against the February cold, not checking his phone, just standing, watching the arrivals gate. When he saw her, he did not wave or come toward her dramatically. He waited for her to reach him. She reached him. She was still carrying the heavy coat her mother had sent. He took it from her without comment, which was the right thing, and they walked to the car. "How is your family?" he said. "My mother cried," Zara said. "At the airport. Coming and going both." "That's good," Rio said. "Yes," she said. "It is. She slept for 12 hours when she got home." He left without waking her. There was tea ready when she did wake up, in the thermos she kept on the counter. He had made it at some point before he left. She held the thermos and thought about the specific quality of a person who thinks to do that, and does it, and leaves without requiring you to acknowledge it. She acknowledged it the next time she saw him. He said it was nothing. She said it wasn't. He did not argue. The spring came early that year. The plum trees near the river bloomed in February instead of March, and then the cherry trees followed in a rush, everything ahead of the usual schedule, as if the year had decided to get on with it. Zara walked under them on her days off. She took photographs and sent them to her mother, who sent back photographs of rain in London, which was her mother's way of communicating that London was London and that Osaka was doing Osaka correctly. On one of these walks, she ran into Michiko. Not planned. Michiko was moving slowly along the path near the river with a cane she had recently started using, and the deliberate quality of someone who has decided that deliberate is the right pace and will not be hurried. She was wearing the dark coat. She looked exactly like herself. "You are here," Michiko said, as if this were unsurprising and therefore not worth remarking on. "I live near here," Zara said. "I know," Michiko said. "Walk with me." They walked for 20 minutes. Michiko spoke about the trees, specifically about the ones she remembered from 40 years ago, and how they were the same trees and different trees at the same time, replaced branch by branch over the decades. She spoke about her mother briefly, about how her mother had walked here too. She spoke about Rio as a child who had found cherry blossoms boring and had said so with the confidence of a 9-year-old who does not yet know what he doesn't know. "He knows now?" Zara asked. "He notices things," Michiko said. He always noticed things. He was simply very selective about which things he allowed to matter to him. She paused. She was looking at the trees. He is less selective now. Zara understood this was the nearest Michiko would come to saying what she was saying. She did not push for more. She did not need more. They reached a bench. Michiko sat. Zara sat beside her. They were quiet for a while in the specific way you are quiet with someone when the silence is comfortable rather than uncertain. "Are you happy?" Michiko said. The question surprised her. Not the question itself, but the directness, the way Michiko asked it as if it were an ordinary thing to ask. Practical, necessary information. Zara thought about it. She thought about the clinic and the work and the way the evening wing felt like hers in a way she was still getting used to. She thought about her mother's face at the airport. She thought about tea in a thermos on a counter and a man who made space on a shelf without being asked. "Yes," she said. "I think I actually am." Michiko nodded. "Good," she said. "That is what I was hoping to hear." They sat there for a while longer. The river moved. The blossoms fell in ones and twos, carried on a wind that was not quite warm yet, but was getting there. Michiko did not tell her what she already knew. She did not explain or elaborate. She simply sat beside her in the February afternoon and let the trees do what the trees were doing. That was enough. That was entirely enough. Ryo did eventually visit the man in Kyoto. He went on a Tuesday in April, on his own, without telling Zara until afterward. He told her that evening, not what had been said, but that he had gone. That the man had known, he thought. That some things people already know. She looked at him. He was looking at the window. The river again, dark now, the day done. "Was it what you thought it would be?" she asked. "No," he said. "It was better." She nodded. She put her hand on his. He turned his over so their palms met. They stayed like that for a while. Some people spend a great deal of their lives waiting to be chosen. Maybe you know what that is like. Maybe you have been in rooms where you were the best person there and the last one they thought to ask. Waiting for someone to look at them fully and decide that what they see is worth staying for. Zara had learned, across 7 years and 2 countries and 100 small indignities, that the waiting is not the answer. The answer is to do the work right and show up for the people in your path and pay attention to what is in front of you. Because the things that matter arrive sideways, through the checkout line in a grocery store, through a corridor in a clinic, through an old woman with a cloth bag who watches you put the items back one at a time and thinks, "There she is." You cannot know which act of care will be the one that changes the course of your life. That is not a reason to be less careful. It is the best reason to be more. Zara believed this. She had believed it before she had evidence for it, and she believed it more now that she did. So did Ryo, who had grown up in a world that would have told him otherwise if he had listened. He had Michiko's voice in one ear for 25 years, which was sufficient counterweight. He had learned to listen to the right things. He was still learning. So was she. That was also sufficient. There is a kind of dignity that gets stripped away so gradually you almost don't notice it happening. A small word here. An assumption there. A task assigned to someone less qualified because the room decided, before you opened your mouth, that you were less qualified. A complaint filed because catching a mistake was somehow worse than making one. It accumulates. Most people who have experienced it have also developed, out of sheer necessity, the ability to function at full capacity while it is happening. To keep showing up. To keep doing the work right even when the work does not protect you. To maintain a standard the room will not match and may never acknowledge. Zara had done this for 7 years. And if you have ever had to carry that kind of weight while still showing up every day and doing the work right, you know exactly how much that costs. She had not been crushed by it, which was not the same as saying it had not cost her anything. It had cost her things she could not always name. A certain kind of ease. The ability to walk into a new situation without first doing the calculation of which version of yourself is safe to lead with. The complete and unmarred confidence she had had at 22, which was now something different. Still confidence, but with awareness underneath it. The knowledge that confidence is not a shield, and never was. What Rio had given her, and I want you to understand what this means, was not the removal of that awareness. She would carry it, as long as she lived, and she was at peace with that. What he had given her, what Michiko had given her, what the clinic in its imperfect way had eventually given her, was a room in which she did not have to spend energy on the calculation. A room in which she could simply be what she was, and have that be enough. More than enough. The thing that was wanted. She had not expected that from a man whose world was what his was. And if you are honest with yourself, you probably would not have expected it either. Most people would have looked at what he was and decided what he could not be. She looked at what he was and waited to see what else was there. She had not expected a great deal of what had actually happened. She had learned, across the years, not to expect the thing that would help. But she had also learned, and this was the other side of the same coin, not to refuse it when it arrived. The student whose groceries she had paid for that Tuesday in March came back. Zara was at the Izumiya the following week, same time, same list, and the young woman was at the register ahead of her again, this time, with enough money. Plenty of money. But she turned when she heard Zara's voice asking the cashier about the green tea, and she said, "You're the one from last week." Zara said she was. The student, whose name was Hana, said she had thought about it all week. That she had told her roommate. That she had thought about how you could be in the worst part of a bad month. And it had been a bad month, she said, with the frankness of someone 20 years old who has not yet learned to bury things. And a stranger could do something so small, and it could feel like the whole world was not what you had been thinking it was. Zara looked at her. She thought about a grocery store in November. A cloth bag. An old woman in a dark coat who stood at the exit and watched until she turned the corner. "It happens," Zara said. "You do something small. Sometimes it matters more than you know." Hana said she was going to do it for someone else. The next time she saw someone in that situation at the register, she was going to step forward. She said this with the seriousness of someone making a genuine commitment, not a sentiment. Zara said that was exactly right. She paid for her tea and walked home. The river was up from the spring rains, moving faster than usual, carrying everything towards somewhere else. She watched it for a moment from the bridge. The current was strong and brown and indifferent, and somehow also exactly right. Just the river doing what rivers do, patient and continuous, and not asking anything of anyone. She thought about Michiko on her phone at the exit of the store. One ring. "Come, you can spend a lot of time thinking about this." She certainly did. She thought about how many things had to be exactly what they were for this particular life to have assembled itself the way it had. The timing of the shift she was working. The aisle she chose. The specific way the coins had come up short. The fact that she had been paying attention that day and not somewhere else in her head. She did not believe in fate. She believed in attention. And if you take nothing else from this story, take that. She believed that attention was its own kind of agency, that choosing to see the person in front of you, clearly and without calculation, was one of the few genuine freedoms you had in a world that was constantly asking you to see through people, past them, around them, as obstacles or instruments or scenery. She had been treated as scenery. She knew what it felt like. She tried, as a result, not to do it to anyone else. That was the whole of it, really, not a philosophy, not a system, just a practice, daily and imperfect, of paying attention to what was actually in front of you and responding to it honestly. It did not always lead somewhere extraordinary. It led to a student in a grocery store who said thank you and meant it. It led to a tea made before anyone asked. It led to a bow held for 2 full seconds in the exit of a store, and an old woman with a phone in her hand, and everything that came after. Some things find you. You cannot plan for them. You can only be present for them. Awake, paying attention. Unafraid to step forward when the arithmetic is not working and you have the means to change it. That is enough. That is more than enough. If this story stayed with you, tell us in the comments, what was the moment that made you stop scrolling? Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There are more stories coming, and they will find you too.